welcome to the Deep Dive. So we've got this stack of recent Bloomberg technology interviews and transcripts here. Looks like they're really focusing on technology, global policy, market dynamics, that whole intersection.
Yeah, it's quite the mix.
Our mission today is basically to dig into these, pull out the key insights, maybe some surprising facts, and just help you quickly get a handle on the, critical shifts happening in tech right now.
Sounds good.
We'll cover things like trade tensions, market forecasts, the AI explosion, investment trends, basically the forces shaping tech as we speak.
It really is a fascinating tangle, isn't it? You see these policy decisions made, and then, boom, they ripple through everything.
Exactly. Boardrooms, components, it's all connected.
Yeah.
These sources really drive that home, policy, markets, innovation, investment, all linked.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's start with that geopolitical piece.
Yeah.
The tech trade tensions. We saw President Trump recently accusing China of violating an agreement, though the sources were a bit vague on the specifics.
Yeah, they didn't spell out exactly what violation he meant, but the context they gave is crucial. It's all happening with these existing U.S. export controls already in place, right?
Right, the ones on advanced tech to China.
Exactly. And a big point was restricting chip design software makers from selling to China. Beijing, according to these reports, sees that kind of thing as violating the spirit of recent talks.
Feels very tit for tat. U.S. puts curbs, Beijing might retaliate.
And one potential retaliation mentioned was critical minerals, restricting exports to the U.S. That apparently came up from the U.S. trade negotiator in Geneva.
Interesting. And this fits into that framework the U.S. administration uses, the promote and protect idea.
Precisely. Protect with tariffs, promote with stimulus and domestic investment.
And the interviews suggest China's doing something similar.
Yeah, basically described as the same playbook. Pumping capital into infrastructure, high-tech projects like AI, trying to boost their own economy, ensure domestic demand.
Which, from the U.S. administration's perspective, isn't ideal.
No, because the stated goal, especially from the U.S. side, is bringing manufacturing back, semiconductors particularly.
Right. There was that mention of pressure on Tim Cook about making iPhones in the U.S.
Yeah, though the sources kind of frame that as a pipe dream for now.
A pipe dream. Okay. But the desire is there as a policy goal.
Absolutely. It's a clear priority, even if the reality is, well, complex.
So these big policy fights, they're not just abstract. They hit specific markets. Let's look at smartphones. The forecast changes there were pretty stark.
They really were. The latest global forecast for 2025, basically flat, like 0.6% growth.
Wow. And that was down from what, earlier?
Earlier, they expected about 2.3% recovery growth. So yeah, a big drop.
Okay, so why the big revision? What's driving that uncertainty?
It was described as a whirlwind of uncertainty, just a mix of things. Global turmoil, soft demand in big markets, the tariffs we were just talking about, ongoing supply chain headaches.
And specifically on tariffs, there was that Trump proposal for a 25% levy on smartphones made outside the U.S., even after hints they might be exempt.
Correct. And that 25% idea, if it actually happened, is seen as a huge downside risk, particularly for the U.S. market forecast.
How so?
Well, it would just mean higher prices, plain and simple, which changes demand patterns here in the U.S.
And didn't they say the U.S. and China markets are kind of holding up the global numbers right now?
Yeah, basically propping up that flat growth. But if that 25% tariff hits, the U.S. market itself could actually, go into decline.
And that applies across the board, right? Not just iPhones.
Right. Any smartphone brand not made in the U.S. would be affected.
So if making them in the U.S. is a pipe dream, like the sources say, where are companies looking to shift manufacturing to?
Well, they're definitely looking to diversify outside China. The two places that kept coming up were Vietnam and India.
Vietnam and India. Makes sense.
Yeah, they're seen as the main hubs for that diversification. Bringing large-scale smartphone making back to the U.S., the sources frame it more as an ideology or a dream.
Why is that?
Because that whole complex supply chain ecosystem is just so deeply established in Asia, it's not something you can just replicate easily.
Okay, so lots of uncertainty in hardware markets due to policy stuff. But let's pivot. Where did the sources see more opportunity, more resilience? AI came up a lot, specifically agentic automation. UiPath talked about this.
Yes, UiPath, they're focused on agentic automation. And interestingly, they mentioned seeing renewed interest from federal government clients in D.C.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Even with transitions and things?
Yeah, described as a positive environment there. They specifically mentioned an Air Force initiative, Airmen, aiming to use automation to transform business processes.
And UiPath seems pretty bullish on agentic automation itself.
Oh, incredibly so. They called it a tremendous opportunity, potentially even bigger than previous automation waves.
Yeah.
Highly transformative for businesses.
So what's their unique take? How are they different?
Well, they pointed out that while lots of AI agents focus on conversation, their tech is about orchestration.
Orchestration, meaning?
Meaning managing the flow between their existing RPA bots, these new AI agents, and human workers, connecting them all together. They see that as critical for actually deploying agents in real existing business processes.
Ah, okay. So it's not just the agent, but making it work with everything else.
Exactly. Building that reliability and trust needed to actually scale it up.
Makes sense. What about the cost? Is it just compute power? Or is there more to it for this agentic automation?
Good question. They said, yeah, inference costs are coming down, which is great. But the real cost bottleneck right now, it's the implementation.
Implementation, like setting it up.
Sort of. It's the expertise needed to build agents that can actually mimic complex human skills effectively and integrate them properly. That skill set is apparently still pretty rare.
Correct.
So a big focus for UiPath is developing tech to democratize the ability to build agents, make it easier, more accessible. That's how they see tackling the real cost of deploying agentic automation at scale.
That shift from compute cost to implementation cost.
Yeah.
That's a really key point. Okay, let's bring in the money side, the investment perspective. We heard from JP Morgan's private growth equity team.
Right. Their approach, investing earlier stage, Series B through pre-IPO. And their pitch isn't just cash, it's leveraging the whole JP Morgan machine.
The whole machine.
Yeah, their huge internal tech spend, something like $18 billion a year, was mentioned, their army of technologists, their corporate connections globally. The message was basically, we're JP Morgan, global footprint, operational know-how.
And where are they seeing the big opportunities right now? Where's the money flowing?
Two areas consistently came up, AI and cybersecurity.
No surprise there, I guess.
Described as incredibly resilient sectors for tech spending, even when the broader economy is shaky.
Why AI specifically? What's driving that resilience?
It's the shift from just playing around with it to actually using it. The report mentioned over 65% of companies are now deploying AI in full production, automating tasks, finding efficiencies. It's becoming real.
And cybersecurity, just keeping up with the threats.
Pretty much a defensive posture. Especially against new threats like AI-generated stuff, virtual replicas, deep fakes. You have to invest to protect yourself.
Did they mention any specific companies in their portfolio?
Yeah, a couple were highlighted. AlphaSense, that's a market intelligence platform using AI, and Databricks seen as, critical infrastructure for the AI world.
Right, Databricks comes up a lot. And we keep hearing about companies staying private longer. Did that come up?
It did, trend confirmed. Companies are staying private for longer stretches. And to give employees and early investors some liquidity, they're using things like tender solutions more often. Databricks was cited as an example there, too.
So if they're staying private longer, what about exits, IPOs, acquisitions?
The picture painted was, well, it was like a faucet that was completely shut off is now maybe a trickle.
Just a trickle.
Yeah. But there's some hope expressed for maybe more public market exits later this year if company performance stays strong.
Okay, let's finish our AI focus with the view from a hyperscaler, AWS. We heard from their CEO, Matt Garman, reflecting on his first year.
Yeah, his take was pretty upbeat. He called it a fantastic year of innovation, talked about the explosion of AI, seeing customers move entire estates into the cloud. He seems personally convinced that every business, industry, and job will be transformed by AI.
And AWS's AI business itself is already huge, right?
Oh, yeah. Already a multi-billion-dollar run rate sales business. That includes customers running their own models using Bedrock.
Bedrock gives access to models like Anthropic's Claude.
Exactly, including the latest Claude 4, plus their own tool, Amazon Q. And of course, Amazon uses AI massively internally, too.
What about that training versus inference debate? Where's most of the action on AWS right now?
According to the sources, the majority of usage currently is actually inference, using the models, not just training them.
Is that the long-term expectation too?
Yes. The thinking is, while early days were heavy on training, The usage is just exploding. So over time, they expect maybe 90% of AI workloads will be inference. Inference is becoming like a basic building block, like compute or storage. It'll just be embedded everywhere.
Making it hard to even track AI revenue separately eventually?
Potentially, yeah, because it'll just be part of the application stack, delivering efficiency, new features, better user experiences.
We often hear about tokens for measuring AI work. How does AWS view that metric?
Garmin acknowledged tokens are, increasing rapidly and interesting for tech stuff, but he argued they don't capture the whole picture,
How so?
especially for reasoning models that might think or process for hours doing research coding before giving an output. That work isn't really reflected in just the final token count. Same for image or video work, so useful but limited.
Got it. And tell us about Project Rainier. What's that?
That's a big deal. It's a collaboration with Anthropic. They're building this massive compute cluster using AWS's own custom chips, Trainium 2,
For what purpose?
specifically to train Anthropic's next-gen Claude models. It's supposed to be over 5 times bigger than the cluster used for the previous top model. Servers are apparently arriving now. Anthropic's using it.
And the goal with Trainium 2? Is it just raw power?
Power, yes, but also cost performance. That was emphasized. AI is still too expensive, even with costs falling, so they need innovation in silicon like Trainium 2 and software to keep pushing those costs down.
How do they see Trainium 2 fitting in with, say, NVIDIA?
They called NVIDIA fantastic, a leading platform. AWS is a partner, getting the latest stuff like the GB200 chips for their P6 instances, which are ramping up. But they see a massive opportunity for alternatives too, like Trainium 2. It's less about Trainium versus NVIDIA and more about giving customers choice. Different chips for different needs.
Makes sense. What about Anthropic's models being available on, like, Google Cloud or Azure?
Gurman's view was pretty pragmatic. He basically said that's okay. He gets that customers use multiple clouds. AWS just aims to be the best place to run any workload.
But they expect most of the usage for partners like Anthropic will still be on AWS.
That's the belief, yeah. The vast majority. He also sort of invited other model makers, mentioning OpenAI, to make their models available on AWS too.
Interesting. And finally, any updates on data center expansion?
Yep, ongoing stuff. Latin America is growing, Mexico region launched, Chile announced, Brazil strong. And in Europe, the big thing is the upcoming European sovereign cloud.
Sovereign cloud.
Yeah, expected end of the year. Designed specifically for critical EU government or regulated industry workloads that have strict data sovereignty rules. Described as a pretty unique capability.
Okay, so let's try and tie this all together for you, the listener. We've seen this global policy landscape really creating turbulence, right? Affecting tech trade, manufacturing.
Yeah.
Especially with things like smartphones.
Yeah, those potential tariffs, market forecasts getting revised down, real impacts.
But then, amidst all that uncertainty, AI, whether it's agentic automation or the cloud infrastructure underneath, seems incredibly resilient. Lots of investment, lots of innovation happening.
Definitely seen as transformative, regardless of the macro headwinds.
And these big forces, these sometimes competing trends, they really matter. They affect the cost of technology, where tech jobs might go, how businesses even operate.
Right. Understanding these dynamics gives you a really important lens on where the economy and tech are heading. It's all deeply intertwined now.
Which kind of leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on. We've got this push for national tech protectionism, bringing manufacturing home, right? But at the same time, AI development and deployment feel increasingly global, spread across these huge cloud platforms. So how do those two forces, nationalism and globalized AI, ultimately play out? Who wins, who loses in the next decade of tech? What does that global footprint of tech actually look like when you have these competing pressures?
That's the big question, isn't it? How do you reconcile those potentially conflicting directions? Something to definitely keep an eye on.